Thanks a lot for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks for finding me interesting enough to want to have me on your show.
I find everyone super interesting. You never know what kind of stories are going to bubble up when you start talking to folks. So it's I feel selfish about it, really, because I just feel like I get to pick all these people's brains.
No, it's right. That's true. It's like you never know what kind of story someone has, for sure.
Yeah. So we were talking there just before we went live. So you got quite a history of course journalism, and I know you're working with Outdoor Elements. Is that correct?
I was, yeah.
You were, okay.
I did stop there just to kind of focus more on the book.
Okay.
Because I felt like I was using it as a procrastination almost.
Okay.
Like, I don't feel like writing right now, so I'll work on Outdoor Element stuff. But yeah, I had to kind of step aside from that and just dive right in. Okay,
that's actually, that was going to be a question I was going to ask you about writing. Is that, like, as a creative person myself, it's very easy to come up with reasons to procrastinate, and also really easy to kind of wait for the inspiration to come to you. And I mentioned before we went live that I've never spoken to really a writer or an author before. So I'd be kind of curious to hear you talk more about that, to be honest.
Okay. Unless you have crazy talent or unless you know what you're doing, I don't think I could have done this alone. I started this process 2 years ago in July. It kind of just came to me. My husband and I were going to bed one night, and he had always said, you should write a children's book. I was like, why a children's book? And I remember in university, my aunt telling me, you should write a book. And I don't know if she meant like a self-help book, because I had a lot of anxiety and stress in that time. So I don't know if at that time she had planted the seed that I buried, and I was like, whatever. So yeah, I was going to bed one night, and as I was falling asleep, I got this idea. And my sister and I are very different, and I won't say in what way because you'll have to read the book to find out. But as I was falling asleep, I got this idea that what if something happened to me that allowed me to see her perspective and live her life.
Okay.
And I got these like full body chills. I like levitated in my bed. Not really, but I was like, oh my gosh, I have to write this sentence. It was a sentence that came to me.
Okay.
And I remember I wrote it down and I said, this is a book. Like, it was like, holy crap. And it's not like the name that I came up with. It's not the name that I use. But the sentence that came to me was, Martha was 17 years old when her entire life flashed before her eyes, except it wasn't her life at all. It was that of her younger sisters. And I was like, holy crap. And I don't know where the name Martha came from. It's not the name that I used for myself in the book, but I was like, and it ended up being, I wrote the book from my 17-year-old self perspective.
Okay.
So I gathered a lot of inspiration from that time in my life. I was a little confused. I think I had a little bit of depression, anxiety, just based on my sister and my relationship. I think there was a lot of guilt too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just a lot of things that now that I'm almost 40, I can look back on and be like, okay, now that I'm a parent and now that I've lived somewhat, I can look back on that time and be like, okay, this is why you thought that, but this is actually what was happening.
Okay. So the perspective has obviously changed things.
Big time. Yeah. And I can relate to my parents differently because I'm like, oh, well, like they were trying the best that they could with what they had, and or they did the best they could with what they had. And yeah, I think I used to judge them a lot. And now that I'm a parent myself, I'm like, no, like they were trying their best. So the book is young adult.
Okay.
It's going to be that genre, but there's elements of mystery. There's elements of, maybe do I dare say thriller a little bit?
Yeah,
like there's all these different themes and all these different directions that it goes in, and it kind of surprised me. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like it's a mix of like fiction, but based on your real life experience.
It's definitely my memoir based in fiction.
Okay.
I tried to write it as a memoir, and I kept saying, like, this is so boring. I felt so whiny about it almost.
Okay, interesting.
because I was like, my life is not that interesting. Like, why am I writing a memoir? But with fiction, I was able to add like layers of magical realism, which I never thought I would do. I was able to add a lot more symbolism and just make it work in the way that I wanted it to, and kind of rewrite history in a way, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, it just kind of lets you play with the past a little bit. Is it kind of a mix of making it more, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but maybe you're like more exciting or like more engaging to the reader, or is that not really in your mind when you're making
it was, and it's obviously I'm very upfront that it's not, it is fiction, so it's not like I'm bending the truth in any way.
Okay.
And once you read it, you'll be like, yeah, this obviously could not happen. But I'm big into like, I wouldn't say I'm not religious by any means, but I'm very much there's a higher power out there. There's things working in my favor that I'm not even aware of. Stop trying to control everything. Like, just go with it.
Okay.
So there's a lot of that in it too. So it added layers, it added depth, it added intrigue.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the moment where you kind of got that feeling where you mentioned you felt like you were levitating. Did you wake up kind of the next day and start writing right away, or
Yes.
Did you have to discover a process? How did that kind of unfold?
I tried it. So I knew that I could have hired someone to help me back then, but I really wanted to. It was almost like a purge. Like, it's on my couch right now. I have like 5 or 6 full journals of just thoughts.
Okay.
And it was not anything organized. It was just like, get it out. And I felt that as I was writing it down, it would clear up old layers of stuff that I was like, oh, that's hidden in there. And then I'd write that out, and then it would go deeper and deeper and deeper.
Okay.
And I used to be, not so much now, but I used to be a chronic overthinker. Mm-hmm. I felt like I had to have everything perfect and everything laid out and organized. And this process was not at all like that. So I tried it on my own for, probably 6 months.
Okay.
And then I hired an editor, a friend of mine who lives in Toronto, who is very artistic, creative, is an actor, writes all these different things, does commercials. She has a friend, and she's like, I asked this friend of mine to be my editor because she's also writing a book. And I hired her for 3 months, and she's like, I don't really like dialogue and I don't really like fiction. And I said, well, this might not work out. So I tried her for a couple months, didn't even end up doing the last month because it wasn't a fit, which is fine. I tried it. Mm-hmm. So I felt I needed someone to help me with this process, because I felt like I was spinning my wheels and going in all these different directions and never really committing to a way of doing it. So at first I started writing it in the third person, because I said, well, maybe it'll give me some distance from it. And I said, no, maybe I should write it in the first person. Should I write it fiction? Should I write nonfiction? So I was on Instagram one morning, and I came across this Instagram handle. Her name is, I forget her name now, but the company's called Leader Publishing. Mm-hmm. So I messaged her and I said, hey, like, I'm writing a book. Do you help people write books, or do you simply help them publish once the book is complete? She said, I just do publishing, but I work with these 2 people. Their names are Marcy and Alex. The company is called Working Writers Co. And she said they are editors and they help you with the book writing process.
Okay.
So I met with them last December, and they had 2 different programs. They had one called Chapter by Chapter. So someone could pay per month and write a chapter, send it to them, write another chapter, send it to them. Okay. And then they had this cover to cover program. So you pay a fee. You can do 6, 9, or 12 months. And I chose the 6 months. And there's also, like, Tuesday nights, we did a group call for an hour, and it was a lesson. So it would have been, we're going to work on characterization. We're going to work on adding the 5 senses to the descriptions. Like, okay. It was very, very, it was almost like going back to school. Okay. And at first I was like, I don't know, like, I don't want all these other people distracting me from my work, but it was the complete opposite. Like, okay. You ask my husband, every Tuesday night when I came off that call, I was like, I'm so glad I did that program, because it introduced me to all these other people that are also in different stages of writing their books.
Okay.
And then having said that, on Thursdays at lunchtime, a different group member reads a chapter, and then the other group members critique it.
Of your book?
We switch every week.
Okay, so they're like reading a chapter of the book they're working on?
Right.
Okay.
So I might read one week, and then they would say, oh, well, I would change this, or have you considered this? So it was the first week I was extremely nervous. I'm like, oh my God, I'm sharing my work. And then, every week it was just like, it was so great.
Okay.
So I finished, I'm not quite done with them. I actually added an extra month, and then I added an extra 2 weeks just to make sure, like I'm in the final editing stages of it right now.
Okay.
And just really going through, like changing like okay to OKAY. Okay. Changing times or numbers to like the written version, like just little minor tweaks right now.
Yep.
So it's nearing the end, which is exciting.
That is exciting. Is it a little? It's scary and relieving, I imagine, because you have to eventually like show it to the world.
Yeah, like I went home to Nova Scotia a couple weeks ago and brought the computer home with me, and I asked my parents, I said, do you want to read the first couple chapters? And like my dad is very sensitive, and I've told him straight up, I said, this is based on our family. This is based on my 17-year-old's perspective. This is not the way I feel now, and this is not us, even though it kind of is. So when Mom read it, like she got to this part about my grandmother and she was laughing, and I said, okay, like this is great. But then my dad was very quiet when he was reading it. So I was kind of afraid that he would read into it too much and be like, oh, I should have done better. I probably should have not been so hard on her, or things like that. So I was like, oh my God, say something. You're bad, say something.
I can. So a lot of times when people are speaking about these stories, I convert it in my brain to how it feels to work with music. And I know exactly what you mean when you're showing someone a song and they're listening and there appears to be no reaction.
That's almost worse.
It's almost worse. Yeah. So when you're working with this group, and again, I'm thinking about music again too, one of the best things you can have, even though it's sometimes painful, is someone in your world with music that you show them an idea or a song and they point out the weaknesses, or they point out what could be better, which can be painful to your ego and can take a while to get used to, but it's so valuable compared to having someone who just tells you what's already good about it.
This was a funny process because I feel like I've changed so much in the last 2 years. I'm not the same person I was when I started writing it. Even my editors have said when you first started writing and you were just kind of spitballing and saying things just to get them out, you were so angry. I had so much anger that I kept hidden inside. Really? And they can say, like, they're saying to me now, like, your writing is just so, I don't know what they use, but they were just like, there's no anger left. Okay. There's none of that. There's no resentment. There's no, like, even like the relationship with my parents, my sister, even my husband and my son has changed. Like, it's been such a therapeutic experience. Interesting. Just that outlet of being like, this is how I once felt. And this is no longer how I feel now.
Did that anger coming out like affect the way the story was being put together? And then once you worked through it, you like changed the story? Does that make any sense?
I'm not sure if the anger is really in the book. That would be in my journals. I'm surprised the pages didn't catch on fire at some point when I was just, because it was just like, I was always taught, like, don't show emotion, keep yourself together. Don't be a drama queen. And I don't know, I'm at a point in my life now that I'm just like, you know what? Like, who cares? Like, I am a nice person. I was like, it's okay to show emotion. It's okay to say how you feel, as long as you somewhat respect other people. Yeah. But growing up, like, dad was in politics. He was a member of parliament when I was in high school. And again, I'm not here to say, like, blame your parents and blame your past, but we were always taught, people know who we are. People, if something bad happens, if you get caught drinking and driving, if you get pregnant, if you whatever, people people will talk about it. It'll be in the news.
Okay.
So I was always under that, like, don't bring shame to your family. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't be too loud and too much.
Okay.
Because I feel like when I was younger, I was very, very wild and very like a little spitfire.
Okay.
And I feel that this is a big part of the book, that I feel that was stifled. Not necessarily just by, I don't want to say my dad, but not necessarily just from that, but just, I never felt like people got me.
Okay.
Like I never felt like I could relate to other people. And growing up, now that I'm older, I realize that I think it's because I was a lot empathetic. And it was never taught to me like, oh, you don't have to carry everyone else's burdens. You don't have to carry everyone else's problems. Like, you can be there for them, but you don't have to carry it as your own.
Yeah.
So that's also a big realization of the book.
Okay.
You pick it up and read.
Okay. I can relate to that, carrying other people's problems and trying to solve other people's problems, even if maybe they're not asking you to solve that particular problem.
Yeah.
So, but that's interesting. Like I didn't grow up in politics or anything, and I haven't really thought about that at all, really, like being in a family where your name is bigger than just the people or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, we grew up in a small Acadian community between Yarmouth and Digby, and everyone, it's almost like Sussex, like a lot of people know each other. But I felt like for my sister and growing up the way she grew up, I think our community was good for her. It was, people knew who we were, so people didn't stare, people still stared, but people knew us. So they were like, oh, there's Mila and Sarah and her parents. Like, it wasn't, for her, I think it was a good thing, and she still lives there.
Okay.
But for me, it was, I can't wait to get out of here.
Because everyone knew you?
Because everyone knew me, and it's not like I did anything bad in my past, but I felt like I couldn't escape from that. Like, I couldn't escape from the way people knew me, if that makes sense. Yeah. And until very recently, like, if I went home, I was always triggered. It's almost like I would turn into a teenage version of myself again. Okay. Like with my parents, with my family. Yeah. But ever since writing this book, I feel very much freed of that. Okay. I'm like, okay, I'm almost 40. Like, you got to let go of this stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it's strange though, right? I'm nearing 40 as well, but sometimes it's like you still can feel like you're like you can feel like you're in that teenager mind or something. I don't really know how to describe it. You've got the history, right? You've got the history of the people, you've got the history of the place, you've got the history of everything. So it's like, okay, like, live in the moment. Stop adding all the past crap to all this, history. Just leave it alone. Yeah, leave it alone. Learn from it and move on. Yeah, and that sounds like what you did with the journaling, right? So did you journal beforehand, or was the journaling part of the writing process? Yeah, I think I was afraid of journaling. I was afraid of what was going to come up. Okay. But with the book, yes, it was, I think it was definitely part of the process because I didn't know where it would take me. So there's a lot from the journals that actually made its way into the book. So I don't know if I'll burn the journals afterwards and just be like, okay, like, let it go, or if I'll save some of it and look back on it. I'm not really sure. Maybe the next story is in there somewhere, like if it's a continuation. Because I again, thinking about music, like I know a lot of people do this. They'll pump out idea after idea and save them somewhere on a hard drive or whatever. And then you almost forget what's even in there. So then maybe a year or two will go by and you'll open the folder and you'll listen to all these ideas. And sometimes like half of them, like I don't even remember writing or recording that. So if I got rid of it, I wouldn't, it's like I wouldn't even have known it existed. Really? So is that, I don't know if that's like an approach to writers, or if maybe that's what journaling does to some writers as well, provides that. I've never written a book before, so I'm not sure, but I can see myself going through it and just almost like a symbolic, like just burn it. Just burn it. The past is done. This book was kind of like my coming of age, maybe. Yeah. For everyone to read and judge and critique. Yeah. But I'm not scared of it. I wrote it for myself. Cool. And obviously I would like it to sell and for people to read it. But in the end, if no one buys it, it's like, I did this for myself. I did this to say, this is my story, in a fictionalized way, of course. But I did it for me. Yeah. That's the best. That's the best reason to do it. And for people that might see themselves in my 17-year-old telling of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You might inspire. It's fun to think about inspiring other people, you know, like that's a big part of being, at least in my creative world, again, like that's a big part of, even kind of like what you said, even if no one's really listening or checking out the stuff, if you just think of someone out there who might stumble across it and that's the reason why they move on or find the courage to do something, I feel like that's a pretty important reason.
Yeah, and I mean, I grew up on the coast, French Acadian, so the coast plays, like the sea and the ocean, the coast plays a big part in the book.
Okay.
And my husband took the front cover when we were in Nova Scotia a couple weeks ago. And then I put it in this watercolor app.
Oh, cool.
And kind of just had some fun with it. So
okay. Your husband took a picture?
Yeah, I kind of like staged it for him.
Okay.
Hold on, my dog's playing with the toy.
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, no problem.
If it's distracting. But yeah, my husband, I kind of staged it for him and I said, okay, this is right here. This is where I want you to take the picture. So, and then I just threw it in a watercolor app and looks good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll wait till your little puppy. He or she can join the show if they want.
He's pretty rambunctious.
Rambunctious. Yeah. You mentioned going way back, you were like changing between first person and third person. Mm-hmm. That's something I would never even really like spend time thinking about. So like why would you choose one over the other?
I'm not sure why authors decide to do that. I think where I was basically telling my own story, again, fictionalized, it made sense to do the I. Just to be like, I experienced this, okay. I saw this, I felt this way. But yeah, I'm not really sure why some authors choose that. They might say like, oh, she felt this way. Or so I felt it was more personal to do it from the first person.
Okay.
Again, when I started, I think I needed some distance from it to actually get what I needed to get out.
Okay.
So I did start it, I think, in the third person. But then at one point I asked my editors, I was like, okay, like, we got to make a decision here. Like, what do you think? And they were like, definitely first person. Okay. It's more raw. It's more real. It's more, in my opinion, it is anyway.
I guess it's kind of like you're reading it from behind the eyes of the person in the story or something like that.
And I'm hoping that when people read the book, they can put themselves in my shoes and kind of feel what I was feeling and relate in some way. And maybe say like, oh, I remember feeling that way, or I feel that way now.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you made that change, did you kind of have to like, I wouldn't have known, I don't know obviously how much you had written at the time, but would you have to like rewrite the whole thing? Or like, do you have to not throw out the story, but like get rid of the writing and start fresh?
I had enough. I would say maybe not. I didn't have too much. Like I had all these documents open of directions I thought I might want to go. So I'd say I might have had, 5,000 words when I started with them in January.
Okay.
And then they, I remember having a conversation with them. So we would meet every 2 Tuesdays. And they would kind of give me some homework and say, okay, here's the next section you should work on. Here's what you should work on over the next couple weeks. Mm-hmm. And of course, like if I got stuck, we would meet in between those 2 weeks. But one day, one of my editors, Alex, said, what if there was a device? What if you stumbled upon a device that allowed you to see other people's perspectives?
Okay.
And something like that day, I was like, oh my God, I have it. It was almost like this. I went back. I remember my son was homesick that day and it was raining out and he was just on the couch watching TV. And I sat here and I wrote for 8 hours straight and I pumped out like 10 pages. And I was like, this is the book.
Cool.
So that only happened, like we worked together for a month and this was probably early February. And it just kind of kept growing from there.
Okay. It's interesting how some little idea or suggestion can like open the floodgates, don't you think?
Yeah, it was nuts. And there were some days like I really tried to make a habit of every day when my son left for school around 8:00, I would come home if I happened to drop him off or if he would just leave. At 8:00, I sat at this desk and I tried my best until noon to write something. Okay. So some days I would lose track of time and be like, oh, it's 1:00. I need to have lunch. Mm-hmm. Other days it would take everything I had to put 2 sentences together. Yeah. But it was that consistency. I didn't really wait for the inspiration. I made it happen myself.
Okay. That's definitely a thread I've noticed talking to people is that, some people do have the gift to just kind of like pull it out of the sky and come up with this brilliant idea. But the thread I've noticed talking to folks is that they treat it like a job. Like they sit down
Yeah, because I used to run a business and I sold it 4 years ago. And my husband, I was really, really burnt out. And I just said, I need a little bit of time to figure out. And my husband, Jeremy, was extremely supportive. And he said, just take all the time you need, like figure out what you want to do. Mm-hmm. But, take care of yourself and recuperate. And so I worked at Outdoor Elements, the local bike and ski shop, for a little bit. And like I said, when we were kind of chatting before the interview, one day I was like, no, I need to kind of invest all of my time in this book now. I need to cut out any distractions as much as I can with a 10-year-old and a dog. And and especially paying for this program, I was like, I have 6 months. I've paid for 6 months. Like, let's get at this.
Yeah.
So a lot of sacrifices, a lot of, just any free time that I had was spent writing this book.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned your previous job there. You were the owner. Do you mind me saying it, Simply for Life? Like you own that?
Yes. So I had taken that over in 2012 and I owned that for 8 years.
You did some writing there too, right? Like you would have done some like health blogging and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I had a blog. I wasn't super consistent with it, but yeah, there was a lot of, I got to use a lot of marketing, creativity with social media. And even like I took journalism in university. So I felt like a lot of that previous experience, like working in marketing after graduation, all of that played a role in the business ownership because I would meet with people, basically interview them like, oh, how was your week? Like, what do we need to work on? So it all kind of tied in together. Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though it wasn't like directly related to journalism, it had a lot of those aspects. Okay.
And can you kind of see those things moving towards like into the book world? Because I mean, at some point, marketing is involved with authorship too, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've thought of that because I'm not sure yet if I'm going to self-publish or if I'm going to hire like an independent publishing. I don't think I'm going to. A lot of books people will go and do like they want the big publishing houses like Random House, Penguin House, all those, and those can take years. Like you can send query letters and never hear back. Okay. So that lady, I think her name is Courtney from Leader Publishing. Mm-hmm. She does publishing, and again, it's a smaller scale, more independent. So I need to meet with publishers here in the next couple of weeks and figure out, is this going to be the route that I take, or am I going to do it myself? Okay. So where I do have the kind of experience, I have layout experience, proofreading experience, all that stuff, I might do it myself. Okay. But I'm not sure what that entails just yet. Yeah. So that's the next step. Once it's done. Uh-huh. It's figuring out how I'm going to go and put it out into the world. Put it out to the world. Okay. Yeah. Now, is there the debate to be made between like digital publishing and physical publishing, or do you kind of always do both in the book world? I think now, because there's audiobooks. There's I have a Kindle, so that's I think it's all part of it. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, and audiobooks seem to be huge right now. Like. A lot of people seem to enjoy audiobooks. I don't have I can't even think of the word, the focus. I think if I'm driving or if I'm walking, I can listen to an audiobook, but if I'm around the house, I'm like, no, I like to read a handheld version myself. But. Yeah, some people I think driving's probably where it mostly goes down. Do you think you would make an audiobook though, or you'd get someone to, or you could voice it to you? A lot of people like it when the author's the person reading it. But. Yeah, I don't know if people would want to listen to my voice for that long. I'm not really sure. Yeah, you'd be surprised. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't really considered it, but that'll all be decisions that I have to make this coming fall, hopefully. And hopefully, it's ready to go by. I'll say Christmas time, but hopefully it's sooner than that. Okay. Yeah, the publishing seems interesting to me. So because if you were trying to attract one of the large publishers, like you mentioned, you're kind of you would reach out to them and cross your fingers. That, and I think unless you have published work already, whether it's an online journal or something that they can kind of look at, almost like a resume, and say, okay, we like this person's writing style, or unless you have that, or you know someone in the industry, and again, I don't know, but I think they are much harder to get into than the more independent ones. And I think a lot of authors now are self-publishing because A, it's easier, and B, they get to keep all of the profits.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Because I imagine the big houses, like music, they take a pretty healthy cut of whatever they do for you.
But I mean, they also help you market, they help you print and all that stuff. So yeah, I aside from that, I don't know too much because I've spent all my time writing, so I haven't really focused too much on the next step. But that's coming up here soon. Yeah,
the creative portion of the process versus the I don't know, you want to call it the business portion maybe, or something like that.
Which is also creative. Like I know some people have said like, oh my gosh, you're so creative. I'm like, so are you. Like my husband is very into business. Like he's a business guy. And I said, well, you're creative in that way. Like you find solutions to problems. You know, that's his way of being creative. So I think creativity is not just the obvious, oh, I'm an artist, I like to paint, I like to write. It's like, no, everyone's creative. It just depends how you express yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I used to work at the pulp mill in St. John for a few years. And I had that realization sitting there. I was a little bit like out of place being a creative, like sensitive type in a very blue collar industrial facility. But watching some of the folks, even like the way they would choose to work the forklift, or when something wasn't quite right, the creative decisions they'd have to make in terms of maintenance and stuff. And I remember thinking like, there was something I just didn't appreciate, that there's kind of what you just said, the typical creative mindset isn't always the only creativity that's there.
Right. And I think that's eye-opening for a lot of people because they think, oh, I can't do that. It's like, yeah, you can. It might look different than writing a book or painting. It might just be, oh, I create, flower arrangements, or I solve problems without getting too upset about it. I figure it out.
Oh, even thinking about how you're going to present an idea to your boss is you have to be creative about how you're going to make that expression. So.
Absolutely.
Another thing I find interesting is usually when someone goes into a new adventure or follows a new path, you start out feeling like maybe you're the only one, but then you start to learn that there's other people maybe even closer to you than you realize that are kind of in the same world. Did that? Yeah. Did that happen to you? Did that happen to you while you were making this change?
Yeah, we all think our problems are, I don't want to say special, but we all think we're so alone, and it's like we're all different people going through the same shit.
Yeah.
Just some people talk about it and some people don't.
Yeah.
And we'll deal with it differently. But yeah, we're just, I don't know. Just makes us feel more connected, I think, because we're all going through something.
Yeah. Did you have you discovered like a world of authors around New Brunswick, or like locally or anything like that?
Not really. Just in that program that I did with the Working Writers Co., I did meet a lot of people, like I had said, like that are in different stages of writing their books. Most of them are in Ontario, and you obviously you click with different ones. So there's one of them in our group, Jody. He just finished his book. He's a farmer and into agriculture and all that stuff. So he wrote a really interesting book, and his book launch is at the end of September. So I have to decide if I'm going to make it out for his book launch and kind of see how it all works, and actually meet these people in person, because we've known each other now since January, but we haven't actually met. But yeah, within that group for sure, but here not so much, not yet. At the very beginning stages, I had talked to a lady in Hampton that a mutual friend of ours had connected us, and I think she's a teacher. And we had just kind of chit-chatted, and she recommended some books that I read in the starting process, which was actually interesting because I learned two different ways of doing this. There are people that they're called, you're either a plotter or a pantser.
Okay.
So people that are plotters, they write their outline out. They know what their book is going to look like before they even write it. I tried to do that and it didn't work. Okay. I was more the pantser, like fly by the seat of your pants.
Oh, okay, pantser.
So at the beginning, I was trying to separate everything and be like, okay, chapter 1 in this document, chapter 2 in this document. Okay. And with these editors, they don't just wait until your whole manuscript is done. They work with you as you're writing it, and they help you connect the different pieces. So back in like April or May, maybe even sooner, I said, can I just write all of this in one big document? And we got to near the end, and Alex was like, you don't have a climax yet. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Because there's a story arc you kind of have to follow. And once you know that story arc, you watch movies and read books so differently because it's a certain kind of process.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, the climax I wrote in a day. I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And it was one of those, I just sat down and it just kind of wrote itself.
Okay.
It was nuts. So I was definitely more of a pantser, more of a try this and see where it goes instead of having, because I kept trying to have an outline and it was not working.
Yeah, would you have guessed that you were a plotter? Like you like to have the control over things? Yeah.
Yes, because I'm always trying to control things and be organized and strategic, and this was not that at all. It was such a surprising process.
Okay.
Because it almost kind of thematically matched the book, because it was a lot of the book talks about not having control, not being able to change things, accepting things as they are, and the whole book writing process was very much like that. It was just go with it. And it was such an interesting process because there was no ego. There was no, obviously I was somewhat hard on myself because I wanted to get it done, but it was not a stressful process. It was this is going to happen. I'm going to do it. I'm going to finish it. It was a very enjoyable experience, but it was almost like, okay, I'm doing this again for myself and I don't really care what people think.
Yeah.
If they like it, great. If they don't, fine. It's not for them.
You mentioned pressure and if you were a plotter, like you started out as a plotter, like did that add to the pressure? Like,
I think so, because I think a lot of people, they say, okay, I'm going to write X amount of words today, and if they don't, they would feel extremely horrible about themselves.
Yeah, okay.
My thing was sit down at your desk and try and see what happens. And again, some days I would have those epic in the zone flow days that I would write literally for 4 hours straight and be like, I need to go use the bathroom and eat because I have forgotten to do those things. Yeah. But those days did not happen very often. They were more, okay, I wrote about this here. I need to tie the bow and finish this up here. Yeah. So it might be, I might work for an hour or half an hour and get like a paragraph done and be like, oh, I got to go fold some laundry. Okay. So it was just kind of removing those expectations and really going with the flow. And I mean, like I said, I have a son, he just turned 10. And honestly, the year that I started writing this, he has never been sicker in his entire life.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Like every 2 weeks, he had something different. He was sick all that winter. I'm like, am I being tested? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to focus. Yeah. And I was fortunate in a way because I treated this like my job. I didn't have, aside from firefighting, I'm a volunteer firefighter. Aside from that, really, this was my main job. So then I applaud people that work, full time, 9 to 5 shift work and still find the time to raise a family and write a book. Like, I mean, compared to them, I had it easy because my son most days goes to school or daycare. My husband works outside the home. It was just me and whatever dog we ended up with at the time. So yeah, I mean, I might have made it look easy because in a way it was. I had all this extra time, but for people that are working and raising a family and doing other stuff and writing a book, like I commend people because it's not an easy task. Yeah,
it's a lot to handle. And though I mean, you shouldn't sell yourself completely short because when you do have to make that courageous decision to like leave your job behind or leave your world behind and dive into something that is going to be critiqued and analyzed,
My mental health dictated that for me 4 years ago. I had reached the breaking point. But then, it was, I had a hard time coming down from having worked because I felt like, oh, what are people going to think? Like I'm not working. Like, are they going to think I'm lazy? Are they going to think I'm, my husband's the main provider? What are they going to think? And then at one point I was like, no, like who cares? Who cares what people think? Yeah. Like, do what makes you happy. Do what sets you, like makes you feel alive, and don't worry about what other people are going to think.
Yeah. I mean, the people that matter the most are the ones that just want to see you happy anyway. So they're going to support, they're going to support you moving in that direction from my experience anyway.
Yeah. And I'm at a point in my life that I'm like, you know what, I don't really need that support. I'm lucky that I have it.
Yeah.
But to anyone out there listening, like if you feel the call to do something, and whether you have the support or not, just friggin' do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's writing a book or starting a business, or you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'm very much like that. I like to dive into stuff and figure it out as I go.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why
I'm a pantser.
but you spent so long thinking you weren't a pantser, probably, right? So it's kind of interesting.
Maybe I'm not a control freak after all.
Yeah, could be. I'd like to think about too. Okay, so the days where you have I'll call it like a creative outburst, where you're just like flowing for like hours at a time, and you get a lot of pages a lot of words on the page. First of all, do you usually reread what you've written? And when you have like an exciting output like that, do you have to give yourself time before you go back and reread it, or like quote unquote judge it?
Yeah, I remember reading something about like, don't ever reread your work. And there comes a time that you have to.
Yeah.
So I think, I would always reread it. And I was very cautious as to not change too much, to kind of let it sit. Mm-hmm. But the times that I would reread it would be after a weekend. So usually on the weekends, I wouldn't really touch it.
Okay.
Unless I was really on to something that I wanted to keep going. Mm-hmm. But yeah, usually like after the weekend, I would, if I hadn't touched it for a day or two, or if I went away and I hadn't opened it for even up to 4 days, I would start from the beginning and read through it and make changes and tie things together. And so I think everyone's different. Like I when I wasn't feeling inspired, writing this was sometimes really exhausting, I would listen to podcasts on writing and what other writers were doing. And everyone's so different. Mm-hmm. So different. Like some people can go to a coffee house and write. And I was like, I won't ever be able to do that because I will talk to other people the whole time I'm there and get nothing done.
Okay.
But yeah, you kind of have to find your own way of doing it and do what works for you.
Yeah. It seems like, again, I usually convert things back to music. It seems like a person might learn about how a bunch of other people do things only to be like, oh, okay, I don't want to do it that way at all. I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah. And you'll know, like, and writing's, like anything else, but I found with writing, it's such a personal experience because like I said, like, depending on what you're writing, if you're writing from personal stories, that can be very triggering. Mm-hmm. Just, do what works for you and do what's best for you. Obviously, don't be selfish and think of other people. But in a creative process or a project like this, you kind of have to be somewhat selfish. Like I used to ride my bike 3 or 4 times a week, and I haven't really touched it in like a month. Okay. Like it was such a huge part of my identity. And luckily, I have good friends that still, hey, want to go for a bike ride? I'm like, I can't. I have to have a book call, or I have to finish this. So I didn't want this book to take 5-10 years. Like I know some authors that it takes them that long. I didn't want that. I wanted it to be a stage in my life, a project that took obviously as long as it took or it needed. But I didn't want it to take forever. I didn't want to get too lost in it. Yeah,
because it can't. Yeah, I mean, again, I relate. You can have a project on the back burner, and then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 years go by, and you realize you're only half done.
And that's common. Like even Marcy and Alex, my editors, have said like so many people will write a book or start a project and they get it to like 3/4 complete and then they never touch it again. It's like a shame. So if you're listening and you have one of those projects on the go, this is your sign to go finish it.
I completely agree. If you have something sitting at 80%, that's like, to me, the danger zone. You're like, okay, this is 80% done. To me, that's where like things get into procrastination can really, really take hold.
Yeah, and it worked out well for me, and my husband, of course, procrastination-wise, because it was like, I work from home, so it's like, well, don't want to write, go clean the house. So it's like, I would vacuum, or I would fold laundry, or I was like, this needs to get done. Yeah. So that worked out well. Our house has never been cleaner.
That's funny. So he'll want you to keep writing.
Yeah. He's like, when are you writing the next one? Yeah. He actually hasn't said that, but
yeah. No, I get it. I mostly work from home too, so I can kind of relate. Again, it's like
I never used to like it. Yeah, I never used to like working from home, but yeah, I've quite enjoyed this whole process.
Yeah, it's good. It's good if you can manage it. If you can, like you said, everyone's different. So if you can make it work for you, it's just like anything else.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned firefighting. Can we touch on that a little bit? Because how do you become a volunteer firefighter? I mean, I guess you just volunteer, but like, what's the process there?
Well, again, to just kind of letting things happen and going with it. After having worked in the community for so long with Simply for Life, once I stopped doing that, I felt kind of lost. I was like, okay, like obviously I no longer want to feel so, burden's not a good word, but I mean, with the business I was doing, you learned a lot about people. Mm-hmm. Their digestive systems, their marriages. Okay. Like there was a lot there. And I mean, obviously it was a fantastic experience and I'm still very grateful for it because it's really, I don't know, it's not being from here. It kind of helps solidify my place in this community and get to know a lot of people. Okay. So yeah, I was walking our old dog, Brooklyn, in front of the fire station one day. And I remember like, this was 2 years ago now. And I remember thinking like, I'd like to do something like, not at a desk, but like like a physical job, like maybe work for the town or do something. But then with my husband works long hours and it's with a child and like it's not always easy to get up at 7 o'clock and go to work because he only leaves for school at 8. So I remember the dog stopping to have a pee in front of the fire station and they had a banner and it said they were recruiting for volunteers. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I just kind of left it at that. Okay. And the very next morning, 2 houses down, the back steps of this house caught fire. Oh. So my son and I were just leaving for school and I said, oh my God, I said, get in the house. I ran over to the house without any shoes on and helped them with the kids and whatever when the fire department was there. And this guy that I sort of knew that's on the department, Jordan, he was actually at the scene. And I said to him, I said, I think I'd enjoy this. And he's like, come sign up. And it wasn't like, oh, like you're a girl, you can't do this, or what? Like you're tiny and you're, weak, you can't do this. There was none of that. It was just like, yeah, what are you waiting for? Come sign up. Cool. And I signed up that day. Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. And you didn't find it like intimidating or frightening or anything like that? Oh, it's definitely frightening by times. Yeah. It took a while to get fully certified because you have to take a course. And that takes about 6 months. And then after the course, like the classroom stuff is done. It's through NBCC. Oh, cool. Then you have to do practical stuff. So you have to learn ladders, you have to learn hoses, you have to learn how to wear the air pack. And then once all that's complete, then you're certified to actually go into a fire. Okay. And wear the air pack and do all that stuff. So it was a bit of a frustrating process because when I joined, I was 100% ready. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do everything. So that was a very hard process to just be like, oh, well, you don't have training in this, so you can't do this yet. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of calls that even if it was just like a fire alarm, I had to stand at the door and not go in. And that was extremely frustrating. And I knew the reason because it's like, if it's an actual fire, like you're not trained to do this. Mm-hmm. So until, last April, I got fully certified. So I can do most of it now. There's still specialized courses like auto extrication that I can't do because I haven't taken the course yet. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of training, a lot of practice that goes into it. So the whole, I wasn't very patient sometimes when it came to waiting for that. It was very frustrating, but it's been a very cool experience. You never know what you're going to get. Yeah, I would imagine it. I don't think I would have the courage to do it. So that's pretty amazing. Did you have to practice fake fires and stuff? Like, are you going into practice buildings? And we do, yeah. So actually this week, the NBCC burn unit trailer is here. So tomorrow night, it'll be like real smoke, real fire. Huh. When we do it at the training facility here, it's this little smoke machine. So it mimics the blackout conditions. It mimics the smoke. But you're not technically allowed to train like in live fire environments anymore. Okay. But it's a cool group. There's 34 of us, I think now. Mm-hmm. I'm the only female, which that doesn't really bother me. But it's neat. It's a good way to kind of feel like I'm part of the community again, especially having, worked from home for so long. Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. Do you have a favorite? I don't even know if would you call it a job? Do you have like a favorite role in like you got to learn the ladders and the water pump system, I would imagine? Yeah, because we do, it's not just fires, it's car accidents. Oh, yeah, okay. It's fire alarms. There's off-road rescue. So if someone breaks their ankle hiking on the bluff or on the footpath, we're usually called out.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's always different. I think, yeah, fires are definitely my favorite. But obviously it's a double-edged sword, because it's usually, if there's a fire involved, it's someone's property, it's someone's home. So I love the human aspect of it for sure. Like if you go to someone's house and they're on, their house on fire, you get to either kind of safety net and help them through it. It's really, really interesting.
Does it cover a wide region? Does the department cover a wide area?
We all have our different jurisdictions. So sometimes we'll get called out. It's called mutual aid. So you get called out to help another department if they might need some water, they might need extra manpower. Sometimes that happens. But yeah, everyone's got their different territory that they cover.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. Now, that's something I didn't expect to talk about.
And that's actually in the book too. One of my firefighter friends and he's like, "Is there a fire in the book?" I'm like, "No," and I was not expecting there to be, but there actually is.
Oh wow, that's pretty funny.
Well, that kind of ended up there. So.
Yeah, that's very pantser. Everything's just
very
running together. It's an interesting through line.
Yeah, it was. It surprised me, but yeah, that's part of it too.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been chatting for about an hour, believe it or not. You're hoping to have the book out the end of the year?
If it's not out by the end of the year, there's something wrong. Yeah, that'll be my fall project, is figuring out how I'm going to publish it. And but I don't know, like, I'm probably going to have to set up the website, and I'll obviously post it on social media. That was going to be my next question. Where can people kind of follow along if they're kind of waiting in anticipation? Well, my social media, I don't even know what my handle is. Hold on. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. It's just Mila.Maxwell on Instagram. And it is a private account. So if you, maybe I should make that not private as an author. And I think you can actually, like, if you self-publish, you can go to like different bookstores, and including Chapters and Indigo, and just be like, "Hey, I wrote this book. Like, are you interested in carrying 10 copies?" Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So again, this is all new. I'm not really sure how it all works, but I'll, if you follow me on Instagram, I do keep, it's a very strange thing, because I'm not an oversharer. I don't share too much. I'm very open when you know me, but I don't like to feel like I'm bragging, if that makes sense. So when I post things about the book, it still feels very strange. But I know that I have to get into the habit of being like, well, if you want people to read it and buy it, like, you really need to get on that. Yeah, the self-promotion train. I know exactly what you mean. It can feel icky. It can feel icky, even though it's not. Like, I've talked to a few artists who are visual artists that are like, they promote themselves so well. And there's actually this one gentleman in Fredericton. His name's Red Leaf Art. Yeah. And I spoke to him about it in Fredericton, because he was like walking right up to people and being like, "Hey, come over to my table and check out my art." And his art's fantastic. And I asked him specifically, I'm like, "Man, how did you like get to this point?" And he kind of had one of those moments. He's like, "You know what? Like, I'm not a bad person. My art, I'm doing the best I can." Like, he just kind of like had to get over that huge hump of talking about himself. And I think, like, where I'm not from here, so I'm trying to figure out like the different markets where I can talk about it. So it's like, well, I can obviously talk about it and market it in Sussex, but I can market it back home and be like, "Oh, local artist, whatever, local author." And then, having had the business, I did meet so many different people. So, through the Simply for Life crowd, through the gym crowd, through the firefighting crowd, like, just knowing all these different people, I'm like, "Oh, I've been networking this whole time and I didn't even know about it." Secret networks. Yeah. That's very cool. Did you want to give away any secrets about the book? Like, can we hear the title, or is there any like little tidbits you want to, or is it all kind of still on? Yeah. All these different things kind of just happened recently. So the book is called Finding Lady Baltimore. Okay, cool. That sounds nice. It's you'll have to read it to find out what it means. Okay. Again, not the title I had ever, like, the title just came about like a month ago. Like, so if you're writing a book and you're like, "I need to think of a title," it's like, no, it'll come up on its own when it's ready. Okay, kind of presented itself. Yeah. Like a light bulb moment, like an aha kind of moment? Kind of, yeah. And I mean, if you want, I can read the inspiration kind of behind it. This is actually a conversation I had with my grandmother when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Yeah, absolutely. So I can read, it's not very long. Yeah, go for it. When I was 5 years old, I sat at the head of the oval mahogany table in my grandparents' old farmhouse kitchen and told Grams that I wished my sister was normal. I don't remember what made me say this on that particular day. Perhaps it was something that had happened at school to make me realize that Sadie was in fact different, something on which I had speculated for a while. Or perhaps it was because she often lost her cool, sometimes biting her arm to calm herself, making me feel uncomfortable. I hated the way people looked at her sometimes, looked at us as a family. I hated how that made me feel. I wondered what they thought, wondered if she noticed. I started blaming her for how I felt. Angry, frustrated, misunderstood, secondary. While I don't remember the specifics of why I said those words to Grams that day, I do remember the conversation as if it were yesterday. Likely because Grams' response was so much different than what I was used to, what I expected, if I ever dared speak up about how I was feeling in regards to Sadie, or anything I might be struggling with for that matter. I didn't dare question things, but I wondered what it would be like if things were different. Rather than scold me or make me feel as though my feelings weren't valid, like many people did, she sat down beside me, lit a cigarette, and listened before offering her advice. "Oh, Morgan, I know you do," she said as she exhaled to the side so the smoke wouldn't blow in my face. "I know it's not easy, but Sadie is going to show you why she's here. She's going to teach you so many great lessons." At 5 years old, I had a hard time understanding what she meant by any of this. Lessons? What kind of lessons? How would Sadie ever be capable of teaching me anything? I asked myself skeptically, not really grasping what Grams was saying, not having the maturity or experience to even begin to comprehend the weight of her words. "She'll show you all that and more," Grams added, holding the cigarette between her index finger and thumb and giving me a tobacco-scented kiss on the cheek. If only I had known then what I know now, but that wouldn't make for a very good story now, would it?
Cool. I like I like the cigarette imagery.
So that's what, like, that conversation happened in their kitchen.
Yeah.
She was not smoking at the time, but that's why the fiction aspect was such a, I don't know, it added so many cool layers. And I mean, she used to smoke and I told her that she should probably quit so she wouldn't turn green. So she quit not that long after, but yeah, just those little additives, those little layers to add spice and flavor and just, yeah.
Yeah, it's especially because I'm at the age where I can remember still people smoking quite a bit, so it kind of like puts you right in that. It's good with like visualizing it. You know, I could see that perfectly. Someone smoking the cigarette like that.
Yeah, just kind of nonchalantly, like inside with kids. Like, who cares? Like, it was just what you did back then.
Yeah. It's weird to think about, but yeah, totally true.
I used to spend a lot of time in their house, and Mom would say, like, because my sister had to go for different appointments and stuff, and I would spend like the weekend at their house or even weeks at a time. And Mom said, like, you would come home and just reek of cigarette smoke.
Yeah. And you'd be like, what are you talking about? I don't smell anything.
Yeah, don't even smell it.
Yeah. That's really cool. All right. So I'll be looking forward to it. Finding Lady Baltimore coming out do you have a hard deadline?
No, okay. I'm almost done with my editors. I think I have one more week with them, and then I'll talk with some publishers and see what the next steps are. But I will definitely keep you all posted. Yeah, very cool. And I'll put links to your social media stuff in the description and stuff. So anyone who wants to follow along, they can send you a invite or friend request. Yeah, that sounds good. Cool. Is there anything else you want to touch on, Mila, before we wrap up? Oh, probably, but I can't think of it right now. We can do a round two once the book's out, and once you kind of get that part of it, because I would be curious to learn more about the publishing side and the mechanics of it, and maybe after the book's been out for a while, how that kind of all unfolds, or if you ever do any book tours or anything like that. I'd be interested to learn about that myself in a selfish kind of way. So yeah, let's plan to chat this time next year, and we'll see where we're at. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot. Thank you so much. Hey, no problem. Thanks for coming on the show. And I really appreciate your time. Awesome. Thank you. Cool. You're welcome. Have a good one. You too. Bye. Bye.